Good afternoon to all of you. So today, as promised, I will be discussing SLFRS 16, which is the new leasing standard applicable to Sri Lanka, effective from 1st of January 2019. Now, you have to understand, in Sri Lanka, we call it as SLFRS 16, but internationally it is called as IFRS 16. Before this standard was effective from 1st January 2019, the previous standard that was effective was EAS 17. So that is something for your information. So without wasting much time, let me quickly move into the presentation which I prepared for SLFRS 16 or IFRS 16. We'll first discuss the presentation, we'll discuss some questions, and if time permits, we'll move into some multiple choice questions. Let me share my screen. Accounting for leases, as you can see, this standard is called as IFRS 16. In Sri Lanka, it is called as SLFRS 16, and my name is Ruchira Pereira. Right. So I'll go slide by slide. What I'm going to cover in this standard. I'm going to cover the key concepts and principles of IFRS 16, which is about leases, lease accounting by the lessee, and lease accounting by the lessor. So first of all, you need to understand in a leasing transaction. When we enter into a leasing transaction, there are two parties, lessee and lessor. Lessee means the person who obtains the right to use the asset. Lessor means the person who legally owns the asset. Lessee is the person who uses the asset. Lessor is the person who legally owns the asset. So this distinction you need to clearly understand. IFRS 16 leases or SLFRS 16, what we are going to cover, will become effective from 1st January 2019, and it will replace IAS 17. Abolishes for the lessee the distinction between the finance lease and operating lease. So very important point. For the lessee, now you know who the lessee is. Lessee is the person who uses the asset. So the lessee doesn't have to recognize, or lessee doesn't have to distinguish between finance leases and operating leases. You know before, lessee had to distinguish between finance leases and operating leases. But now, as per the new standard, there is no distinction for the lessee as finance leases and operating leases. Basically, lessee recognizes the assets in his balance sheet or in his statement of financial position based on the right of use. Requires lessee to recognize all assets held under a lease contract on the statement of financial position. So this is what I explained earlier. Now, for the lessor, in the case of the lessor, there's a distinction between a finance lease and an operating lease. In other words, because of this standard, accounting treatment for a lessee has changed significantly, whereas the accounting treatment for a lessor has not changed much. In other words, lessor recognized still a finance lease as well as an operating lease. In other words, for a lessor, there's a distinction between a finance lease and an operating lease, whereas in the case of a lessee, there is no distinction between a finance lease and an operating lease. Lessee recognizes the right to use an asset, and based on that, he recognizes all assets in his statement of financial position. So what are the key concepts? What are the key concepts with regard to a lease as per the new standard SLFRS 16? A lease is a contract or part of a contract which conveys the right to use an asset. So very important this word, right to use an asset, which is the underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for consideration. In other words, when you enter into a leasing transaction, you obtain the right to use an asset, which means an underlying asset for a period of time in exchange for a consideration. The underlying asset is the asset that is the subject of a lease for which the right to use that asset has been provided to a lessor to lessee. So as I mentioned earlier, the right to use a particular asset has been given by a lessor to a lessee. So when the lessee obtains the right to use a particular asset in order to obtain future economic benefits from that asset, he has to recognize that asset in his statement of financial position. The right of use asset represents the lessee's right to use an underlying asset for the lease term. So as I mentioned, right to use means the lessee can use, or lessee has the right to use the asset for a particular period of time, or we can say duration of a lease in order to obtain future economic benefits. Right. How to identify a lease? Lease is a contract or contains if the contract conveys the right to control the use of an identified asset for a period of time in exchange for a consideration that we have discussed, the customer should have both of the following for a lease contract: the right to obtain substantially all of the economic benefits from use of the identified asset, and the right to direct the use of the identified asset. So basically, for a lessee to recognize a particular asset, a right of use asset, as an asset in his balance sheet or in his statement of financial position, basically he should be able to obtain the future economic benefits from the use of the asset, and he should be able to control direction of the asset. In other words, he should have the full control over the asset. He should be able to determine in which way the asset should be used in order to obtain the future economic benefits. So if he can do that, then of course, without any problem, lessee can recognize a particular asset, the right of use asset, as an asset in his statement of financial position. So the two most important conditions are: he should be able to obtain the future economic benefits, and he should be able to direct the use of the asset. So let's look at this diagram for you to understand when a lessee can recognize a lease asset. So that should be an identified asset. Of course, there should be an underlying asset. The right to obtain substantially all of the economic benefits, yes, that should be there. The right to direct how and for what purpose the asset is used throughout the period of use. So if these three conditions are satisfied, if a customer is enjoying these three conditions, if there is an identified asset, if we can obtain the full economic benefits from the use of the asset, and if we can control the direction of the asset, or for which purposes the asset should be used, then of course he should recognize that asset, the right of use asset, as an asset in his statement of financial position. So these are three important conditions that must be satisfied for a lessee or for a customer to recognize a lease asset in his statement of financial position. So let's now look at the initial recognition of a right of use asset. So you can read what is given here. Initial recognition. At the commencement date, the lessee recognizes the right of use asset and a lease liability. So when the lease period commences, when the lease contract commences, the lessee recognizes the right of use asset, an asset in the balance sheet, and a corresponding liability, called as the lease liability. This applies to all leases unless the lessee elects the short-term lease and no lease of low-value asset recognition exception. So basically, at the commencement date, lessee should recognize the lease asset, an asset in the balance sheet, as well as a lease liability. So he can deviate from this only if he recognizes a particular lease as a short-term lease or as a low-value lease. So what do you mean by a short-term lease and a low-value lease? A short-term lease is a lease that at the commencement date has a lease term of 12 months or less. A lease which contains a purchase option is not a short-term lease. So what you understand is a short-term lease is a lease which basically at the commencement date has a period of less than 12 months. So if a particular lease has a period of less than 12 months, we can recognize it as a short-term lease, and therefore we do not need to recognize the corresponding asset and a liability at the commencement date if it is a short-term lease. So I repeat, a short-term lease is a lease which is basically has a duration of less than 12 months. So if it is a short-term lease, there is no need to recognize a corresponding asset and a liability at the commencement date of the lease. Then let's look at what low-value leases are. Low-value leases can be any. Low-value leases can be any type of lease. Basically, we are saying low-value leases can only be of low value if both the lessee can benefit from use of the asset on its own, together with other resources which are readily available to the lessee, and the underlying asset is not dependent on or highly interrelated with other assets. Basically, it is whichever the way. Whichever the way, if the lease value is an insignificant amount, if the lease value is insignificant amount, you can recognize it as a low value lease, and you do not need to recognize an initial asset as well as a liability at the commencement date of the lease. So further to this, basically I can say a lease will qualify for the low value asset exemption if it meets the following criteria. Number one, the underlying asset is not dependent on, it should not depend on, or it has to highly interrelate with other lease assets. The lessee can benefit from using the underlying asset on its own or with other readily available resources. Normally we take something as a low value asset if its value in dollar terms is less than $5,000. Normally, assets such as mobile phones, office furniture, other technological operational equipments will become qualified as low value assets. So basically, the threshold or the criteria to recognize a low value asset is that the asset value should be less than $5,000 on its own, and because of the low value or because of the low threshold of $5,000, usually assets such as mobile phones, technological equipment, office furniture will be qualified as low value assets. And using that exemption that is available for the lessee, he can avoid recognizing these assets as assets in his balance sheet and a corresponding lease liability. So let me go back to the presentation now. Initial measurement. At the commencement date, the lessee measures the right of use asset at cost. So basically, when the lease commences, at the commencement date, the lessee has to recognize the right of use asset at its cost. So what do you mean by this cost? Cost means the total of few things. Now, when you establish the cost of a right of use asset, you need to take into account the following components. Number one, the amount of the initial measurement of the lease liability. In other words, you will remember I told at the beginning, when you are recognizing a lease asset, when you are recognizing a right of use asset, on the other hand, you have to recognize a corresponding liability. So basically, as the cost of the asset, you need to recognize the value of this lease liability. Initial measurement of the lease liability. Number two, any lease payments you have made, already over the commencement date, minus any incentives that you have received. So if you have already made some lease payments, or if you are going to make a lease payment at the commencement date of the lease, minus any incentives that you have received, you need to add to the cost of the asset. Any direct cost incurred by the lessee. If you have incurred certain direct costs with regard to the lease, then those direct costs also should be added to the cost of the asset. An estimate. Now, this is only an estimate because this is not something that you can determine when you are commencing a lease. So you have to estimate whatever the cost that you may have incurred to dismantle, to remove, and also to restore the site at the end of the lease term. I repeat, basically, when you are recognizing a right of use asset at the commencement, you have to recognize it at the cost. What do you mean by the cost of this right of use asset? The cost of this right of use asset will comprise of few things. Number one, it will comprise the value of lease liability on the other hand, any lease payments that you have made already or you are going to pay at the commencement date minus any incentives that you have received, any direct costs that you have incurred with regard to the lease, and also you need to add estimated cost of dismantling or removing the asset after the end of the lease period and also restoring the site at the end of the. So all these together we call as the cost of the lease asset. Subsequent measurement, very important. In the subsequent measurement, what you have to understand is subsequent transfer of ownership or whether there is a purchase option. So let's see what is given in this slide. Transfer of ownership or the purchase option. If the lease transfers ownership of the underlying asset to the lessee by the end of the lease term, or if the cost of the right of use asset reflects the lessee will exercise the purchase option, the right of use asset should be depreciated over the useful life of the underlying asset. So basically, if the asset is going to be transferred to the lessee at the end of the lease term, the asset should be depreciated over the useful life of the asset, as simple as that. If the asset is going to be transferred at the end of the lease term, I repeat, if the asset is going to be transferred at the end of the lease term, or if there's a purchase option for the lessee to purchase the asset at the end of the lease term, it is kind of a proper asset that the lessee is using for his operations. Therefore, the asset should be depreciated over the useful life of the underlying asset. Now, on the other hand, if there is no transfer of ownership or purchase option, if there is no transfer of ownership and no purchase option, then the right of use asset should be depreciated from the commencement date to the earlier of the end of the useful life of the right of use asset or end of the lease term. So very important, if there is no transfer option or if there is no purchase option for the lessee, then the asset should be depreciated. It should be depreciated. Whatever it is, whether you are going to transfer the ownership to the lessee or whether you are not going to transfer the ownership to the lessee, asset should be depreciated, but the timing of depreciation will differ. If the asset is going to be transferred to the lessee, then it should be depreciated over the useful life. If it is not going to be transferred to the lessee, then it should be depreciated to the earlier date of useful life or the lease term from the commencement date. So this is basically the difference between the two ways of ownership or the two ways of transferring the ownership of the asset to the lessee at the end of the lease term. If it is transferred, and if it is transferred or if there's purchase option for the lessee to purchase, it should be depreciated over the useful life. If there is no such option, it should be depreciated from the commencement date to the earlier date of the lease term or the useful life. Let's move on. So lease contract capitalization, you are capitalizing at cost. You are recognizing, as I mentioned, an asset as well as a liability. Asset you need to depreciate. Liability you are measuring at the present value of lease payments, including any expected payments at the end of the lease, discounted at the interest rate implicit in the lease. And the interest cost you are expensing to the P&L or to the income statement. So basically, in a lease contract, you capitalize an asset as well as a liability. The asset you will depreciate, the liability you measure at the present value of the minimum lease payments, including any expected payments at the end of the lease, discounted at the interest rate implicit in the lease. In other words, you are discounting the minimum lease payments based on the interest rate implicit in the lease. And the interest expense, the annual interest it could be, or the monthly interest it could be, the interest expense you need to charge into the income statement, to the P&L. So now let's come to accounting by lessor accounting. Lessor continues to classify its leases as operating leases or finance leases and to account for those two types of leases differently. So as I mentioned you, for a lessor, there is no difference or there is no change from the standard. Lessor recognizes still the finance lease as well as an operating lease. So basically, if it is a finance lease, the asset belongs to the lessor. So in the case of a finance lease, a lease is classified as a finance lease if it transfers substantially all the risks and rewards incidental to ownership of an underlying asset. So basically, for a lessor, if he is transferring all the risks and rewards of an ownership of the asset to the other party, the lessee, then of course it is a finance lease for lessor. So what is an operating lease for the lessor? A lease is classified as an operating lease if it does not transfer substantially all the risks and rewards of ownership of the underlying asset. So it is the opposite. If you are transferring all the risks and rewards of the ownership of a particular asset to the lessee or to the other party, for the lessor it's a finance lease, and if you are not transferring the risks and rewards of ownership to the lessee, then it is an operating lease. So basically what we understand is, as per SLFRS 16, there is no change to lessor accounting. Lessor still recognizes finance lease as well as an operating lease. Sale and lease back. Now, what is sale and lease back? Now, this is also something that is coming in the standard, and this is also something that you should understand. Now, sale and lease back is a way of financing an organization. Now, say for example, if a company doesn't have money, and if it doesn't want to borrow, what it can do is it can sell an asset. It can sell an asset, and from the party to who the person or the company selling the asset, the company can lease it back. So the company can still use the asset, and also they can have some amount of money, which is the disposal proceeds. So I repeat, sale and lease back is a way of financing. Here, what the individual or the company does is an asset which is owned by the individual or the company. The person, the individual or the company sells the asset to another party. So thereby they are collecting some disposal proceeds, and disposal proceeds will come to them, which they can use for any other purposes or for their working capital purposes. But on the other hand, the same party same person or the same company will lease it back, will lease the previous asset from the party to whom the person or the company has sold the asset. So basically, the person or the company will continue to use the asset. They will continue to use the asset. They will continue to show the asset as an asset in the balance sheet, and also they will have some amount of money which they can use for some other purposes as a result of selling the asset in the first place. So sale and leaseback is a way of financing an organization. So in a sale and leaseback transaction, we have to first see whether we are meeting the requirements of IFRS 15 or whether we are meeting the requirements of performance obligations as in IFRS 15, because if the sale transaction meets the performance obligation, if the sales transaction is recognized as a proper sale as per IFRS 15, then of course we need to recognize the lease back separately in the lessee's balance sheet. In other words, we have to recognize the proper sale and lease back transaction in the lessee's balance sheet if, as per IFRS 15, the sale is recognized as a proper sale. So the entity applies the requirements for determining when the performance obligation is satisfied in IFRS 15 to determine whether the transfer of an asset is accounted for as a sale of the asset. So as I mentioned, we will first apply the requirements of IFRS 15 to see whether the performance obligation conditions are met in the sale transaction. So if the performance obligation conditions are met in the sales transaction, then of course you will recognize it as first a sales transaction and then as a lease. If the performance obligation contracts or if the performance obligation conditions are not met, then of course you have to recognize the funds that you are receiving from the other party not as a leaseback but as a financial liability. So I repeat, if it is a sales transaction, then of course the asset will be disposed, and then when the lessee enters into a new lease contract with the lessor or to the party to whom he has sold the asset before, then it should be recognized as a new right of use asset. If it is a sale, first the asset will be disposed. There may be a disposal gain that the company that we recognize. But when they enter into a new leasing transaction for a new right of use asset, the new asset will be recognized along with the financial liability, and the gain on disposal, gain on the previous disposal might be adjusted. But if it is not a disposal in the first place, and if you obtain some amount of money from another party, then of course you will continue to recognize the asset in your balance sheet. It will not be considered as a disposal. It will be recognized as an asset in the balance sheet, and the money that you are receiving from the other party will be recognized as a financial liability. So basically, this is the difference between recognizing a transaction as a sale or not as a sale, especially when the same asset is leased back. So let's now discuss some questions to understand exactly how to account for leases by both lessee and lessor based on IFRS 16 or SLFRS 16. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share some questions with you. We'll first read the question and then I will work out the answer in Excel. I hope you can see this question. Can you see? Yes. Oh, right. So this question is about a company called Neon PLC. So Neon PLC is preparing its financial statements for the year to 31st of March 20X4. Neon PLC entered into a 5-year lease contract with PETA for the right to use a mining truck. On 1st April 20X2, the useful life of the asset has been estimated at 8 years with a residual value of 30,190, and the ownership of the lease asset is transferred to Neon PLC at the end of the lease term. So basically, the ownership is transferred to the lessee. So we know if the ownership is transferred to the lessee, the asset should be depreciated over the useful life. The annual payments under the lease are 59,180 payable in arrears commencing 31st of March 2003 or 20X3. The present value at the inception of the lease for 5 installments discounted at 9% per annum. So there are 5 installments. The present value of the lease payments discounted at 9% is 230,190. So this is the initial value of the liability and also the initial value of the asset, which was very similar to the market price at inception date of the lease contract. Neon PLC calculates depreciation on a straight line basis and need to follow IFRS 16 leases. Show how the above issues will be shown in the financial statements of Neon PLC as at 31st March 20x4. This asset was purchased on 1st April 20x2. You have to prepare the financial statements. So you have to show the extracts of the financial statements as at 31st of March 20x4. So after 2 years, in compliance with international financial reporting standards. So let's work out this question now. So let me share a screen. So Neon PLC. Asset was purchased on 20x2. Purchase date 1st April 20x2. Current date 31st of March 20x4. So after 2 years. Present value of minimum lease payments, the inception. Present value of minimum lease payments at the inception, we are told 230,190. 230,190. And also we are told the annual lease payment is 59,180 and the residual value is 30,190. Residual value 30,190. Annual lease payment 59,180. Lease period is 5 years. Lease period is 5 years. Then we are told the useful life of the asset is 8 years. Useful life of the asset is 8 years. For lease term 5 years, useful life is 8 years. Now I can calculate the annual depreciation. Annual depreciation. So how I calculate the annual depreciation? I know since the ownership will be passed to the lessee, asset has to be depreciated over the useful life of the asset. So when we calculate depreciation, since there's a residual value, from the present value of minimum lease payments, which is like the initial cost, I need to deduct the residual value and then divide by 8 years in order to calculate the annual depreciation. So I repeat, present value of minimum lease payments at the inception is like the cost of the asset at the beginning. To calculate annual depreciation from the cost of the asset or from the present value of minimum lease payments, I need to deduct residual value, which is 30,109, and the net value I need to divide by the useful life of 8 years in order to calculate the annual depreciation. Now, what you have to understand is now 2 years have gone since the purchase of the or since the commencement of the lease. The lease commenced on 1st April 20x2. Now we are in 31st of March 20x4. So 2 years have gone. So basically, cumulative depreciation for these 2 years will be 50,000. A cumulative depreciation over 2 years would be 25,000 into 2, 50,000. So I can calculate the net book value. Net book value of the asset. net book value of the asset as at 31st of March 20x4. So initial cost for the present value of minimum lease payments 230,190. That is like the cost of the asset. From the cost of the asset, I need to deduct cumulative depreciation for 2 years, which is 50,000. So net book value of the asset as at 31st March 20x4 is 180,190. 180,190. Now I need to calculate the value remaining on the liability. Now this is the value remaining as at 31st of March 20x4 of the asset. Now I need to calculate the value remaining of the liability. For that, I need to do a small working. Let's look at the lease liability calculation now. Here, you will remember the lease contract was entered on 1st April 20x2. So year ending, first year would be 31st of March 20x3. Second year would be 31st of March 20x4. We know the lease is for 5 years, so I can continue this 31st of March 20x5 for you to understand 31st of March 20x6 and 31st of March 20x7. But remember, we need to only focus on 31st of March 2004 or 20x4. So here ending these dates. Then opening value of the liability. We'll say the liability, brought forward value, brought forward liability. Brought forward liability. So brought forward liability for the first year ending 31st of March 20x3 is the initial value of the liability. It is the present value of minimum lease payments. That is 230,190. So present value of minimum lease payments is the initial liability. So that is the liability which was there at the beginning for the year ending 31st of March 20x3. So for the brought forward liability, we need to calculate the interest. We know in the question, the implicit interest rate was given as 9%. Implicit interest rate was given as 9%. So we need to calculate interest at the rate of 9% for the initial liability. So I calculated the interest at the rate of 9% for the initial liability, then the payment, annual payment. Annual payment is 59,180, that is also given. Then I can calculate the carrying forward liability at the end of each year. Carrying forward liability would be initial liability, interest on that, you are adding interest on that, and you are deducting the payment. So carrying forward liability at the end of year 1. So as at 31st of March 20x3 is 191,727.1, which is the brought forward liability for the following year. In the following year also, we need to calculate interest at 10%. Our payment would be the same amount. Every year we make the same payment. And now I can calculate the carrying forward liability at the end of 20x4. That will be 151,719. There's a small correction here. It should be interest, not 10%. I have taken here. You can see I have taken mistakenly 10%, but it should be 9%. Annual interest rate is 9%. So carrying forward liability at the end of second year, or as at 31st of March 20x4 is 149,802.5. So I can put here carrying forward value of lease liability. Lease liability as at 31st of March 20x4. That will be 149,802. Now, for your understanding, I can continue this schedule. End of second year liability will be the brought forward liability for third year. Then for third year also we calculate interest at the rate of 9%. We make the same payment. And then by applying the formula, I can calculate the carrying forward liability value at the end of year 3. So carrying forward liability at the end of year 3 will be brought forward liability for year 4. So it continues like this. You can see when this table continues, at the end of the 5th year, or at the end of 20x7, at the end, as at 31st of March 20x7, you can see the liability basically has been eliminated. Or in other words, there is no liability as at 31st of March 20x7. So basically, we have applied the same principles. On the brought forward liability, we calculated interest at the rate of 9%, and then we deducted the annual lease payment, which is 59,180. So when we do that, every year lease liability reduces. So the lease liability at the end of year 2 or 31st of March 20x4 is 149,802, which will be completely eliminated at the end of 2007 to 20x7, or basically as at 31st of March 20x7. So this is how we prepare a lease liability schedule. A lease liability schedule, which is 100% accurate. You can see here from the table also, the lease liability after 5 years is completely wiped off. The reverse as at 31st of March 20x7, there is no lease liability. There is no lease liability. After 2 years, at the end of 20x4, as at 31st of March 20x4, there's a liability, which is 149,803. Every year we know annual depreciation, that also we can put. Annual depreciation, earlier we calculated. Annual depreciation, because that also goes to the income statement. Annual depreciation is 25,000. And every year, this column shows the amount of interest. So since we are in the second year, since we are in the year ending 31st of March 20x4, for that year, interest expense is 17,255. Interest expense for the year ending. Interest expense for the year ending 31st of March 20x4 is 17,255. Right. So let me show you exactly where these things are shown. As you know, the net book value of the asset is shown in the statement of financial position as an asset. This is an asset. Carrying value of the lease liability is a long-term liability. Long-term liability in the balance sheet on the statement of financial position. Annual depreciation. This is the expense which goes to the income statement. It goes to the income statement. And interest expense again goes to the income statement. So interest expense for the second year or for the year we are in, 31st of March 20x4 is 17,255, and you can see the interest expense is gradually reducing. It has to reduce since each year we are making a payment for the lease liability. Each year we are making a payment for the lease liability. So the lease liability is reducing every year. So the interest expense for every year is gradually reducing. That has to happen. That is why you can see in the first year interest is 20,717, second year 17,255, third year 13,482, and it gradually reduces to 4,886 in the final year. It has to happen for the simple reason we are making a payment for the lease liability. Since we are paying the lease liability, the interest calculation for the lease liability should gradually reduce. So for the last year, you can see it is a very small amount, 4,886. So this is the answer for the first question. We'll now do another question, similar question. So we'll move into the second question. Right, you can see I hope you can see this question for Triangle PLC. So on 1st April 20X2, Triangle PLC signed a 4-year lease contract. So the lease period is 4 years. They have signed a 4-year lease contract of new equipment to use in construction business. The expected useful life of the equipment was estimated at 8 years with no residual value on 1st April 20X2. The useful life is 8 years. Triangle PLC has the right to use the equipment for the period of the lease contract. According to the lease terms, the owner of the equipment, lessor, is responsible for the repairs and maintenance. The ownership of the equipment is not transferred to Triangle PLC at the end of the lease contract, and there is no purchase option. The present value at inception of the lease, discounted at the 7% implicit rate, was 1,205,850. So it is the present value of minimum lease payments discounted at the rate of 7%. The annual lease payments are agreed to be 356,000 payable on 31st of March each year. The management of Triangle is unsure how to report the lease contract in the financial statements as of 31st of March 20X3, which is the next year. The company needs to account for the lease contract, explain and show how this contract should be accounted for and presented in the financial statements of Triangle as of 31st of March 20X3 in accordance with IFRS 16 leases. Right, so the first thing you need to understand here, and the first thing you need to be clear is whether or not it is a lease. Now, what do you think? Is this a lease? The question says there's an identifiable asset, yes, and also the lessee can decide for which purposes he is going to use the asset. He can basically control the asset, and he will be getting the future economic benefits from the use of the asset. But the asset will be maintained by the lessor. So the first question that you need to answer, or the first thing that you need to clear in your mind, is whether or not this is a lease, whether this constitutes a lease as per IFRS 16. I would say, since the lessee can direct the asset, since the lessee can control the use of the asset, since he is able to obtain the future economic benefits by controlling the asset, although lessor is maintaining the asset should be recorded by the lessee as a right of use asset. So in my view, my answer for this question, before I answer this question, first I will establish whether or not it is a lease. So in my view, it's a lease since there's an identifiable asset, that is number one. And number two, the lessee can decide for which purposes he's going to use the asset. He can control, he can decide for which purposes he's going to use this asset in order to obtain future economic benefits. The asset may be maintained by the lessor. Yes, he is entitled to maintain the asset since the asset is legally belonging to the lessor. Lessor legally owns the asset. So since he legally owns the asset, he can do repairs and maintenance. But the asset is used by the lessee for the purposes that he wants. Lessee decides for which purposes the asset should be used. He is getting the future economic benefits. So the first thing that we need to be clear of is whether or not it is a lease. So the answer should be yes, it is a lease. It is something lessee should recognize as a right of use asset. So we'll first write that answer. I'll open that question on new sheet. So I will say it should be counted as a lease. It should be accounted as a lease since the lessee will say since it should be accounted as a lease due to following reasons. Number one, there is an identifiable asset. There is an identifiable asset. Remember what I told? For a lease to be recognized, for a lessee to recognize a particular lease contract, there should be an identifiable asset. He should obtain the future economic benefits of the asset, and he should be able to decide for which purposes he's going to use the asset. So all three conditions are met. There's an identifiable asset, and number two, I'll combine 2 and 3 together. The lessee can decide. Lessee can decide for which purposes the asset would be used. For which purposes the asset would be used. and the lessee will obtain the future economic benefits. The lessee will obtain the future economic benefits. First of all, we need to be clear about that. Then, of course, we'll go to the question. So it says present value of minimum lease payments discounted rate of 7% is 1,205,850. So it is the initial value of the lease asset and also the liability. So I can say implicit interest rate 7%. Implicit interest rate is 7%. And the present value of minimum lease payments 1,205,850. Present value of minimum lease payments 1,205,850. And then we have annual lease payments 356,000. Annual lease payments 356,000. Lease term 4 years. Lease term 4 years. But the useful life of the equipment is 8 years. And there is no residual value. There is no residual value. So we can calculate the annual depreciation. Can you calculate the annual depreciation? Can you calculate the annual depreciation? Remember, there is no transfer of ownership. So if there is no transfer of ownership, I hope you remember the asset should be depreciated over the early of the useful economic life and the lease term. So out of these two, useful economic life is 8 years, lease term is 4 years. So the earlier period is 4 years, so therefore asset should be depreciated over 4 years. So the annual depreciation rate should be 25%. So we can say, since the ownership is not transferred, the asset should be depreciated. The asset should be depreciated over the earlier, the useful life and lease term. Therefore, the asset should be depreciated. The asset should be depreciated over 4 years. Because the earlier period is 4 years. Lease term 4 years, useful life is 8 years. So the earlier period is 4 years. So the asset should be depreciated over 4 years. Asset should be depreciated over 4 years. Annual depreciation rate. Therefore, annual depreciation rate will be 25%. That is 1 divided by 4 years. 25%. Right. There is no residual value. So we can calculate the annual depreciation. Annual depreciation would be, we know, the cost of asset is the present value of minimum lease payments. There is no residual value. So cost of the asset into annual depreciation rate, 301,462.5. So this goes to income statement. So net book value of the asset, net book value of the asset as at 31st of March 20x3 would be, from the initial cost, we are deducting the depreciation of 20x3, since we are calculating the net book value as at 31st of March 20x3. So we only have to deduct 1 year's depreciation. So from the initial cost, which is the present value of minimum lease payments, we need to deduct 301,462.5, 1 year's depreciation. So this is the net book value of asset as at 31st of March 20x3. This goes to balance sheet. Now let's prepare the lease schedule. Year ending. Lease period is 4 years, 31st of March 20x3. So I need to complete this until 20x4. 20x6 is x4, this is x5, this is x6. So you will remember the previous schedule. For each year, we need to take the brought forward balance. We need to add the interest for the opening liability. We need to deduct the payment in order to calculate the carried forward balance. So in the first year ending 31st of March 20x3, brought forward balance is the initial value of the liability. Initial value of the liability is 1,205,850. Interest rate is 7%. Interest rate is 7%. Implicit interest rate. That's a fixed rate, 7%. Payment. Payment is 356,000. And now we can calculate the carried forward balance. That is, for the initial liability, I need to calculate here the interest value. So carried forward balance would be at the end of 2003 or 2003, 20x3, 1,205,850 plus to that I'm adding 84,410 and deducting 356,000. So carried forward balance as at 31st of March 20x3 is 934,260. Now I can link all the figures. So you will see, as per this table, as at 31st of March 20x6, so at the end of the lease, or as at 31st of March 20x6, there is no lease liability. Lease liability has been eliminated, or there's a small amount here remaining, which is due to rounding off. Or, in other words, we can safely assume the lease liability has been completely eliminated after 4 years, or as at 31st of March 20x6. So these are the interest. These are the interest values. You can see, like in the previous question, interest values are declining. Starting with 84,410, it gradually reduces to 23,290 by the final year. Annual lease payment is same. Interest payments are gradually declining, and there is no lease liability at the end of the 4 years, or as at 31st of March 20x6. So basically, we can say here, present value or carried forward value carried forward value of the lease liability. Carried forward value of the lease liability is 934,260 as at 31st of March 20x3. So this again goes to balance sheet as a liability. And the first year interest for the year ending, 31st of March 20x3. That will be 84,410. It goes to income statement. This is how it looks like. Annual depreciation, we need to first decide the depreciation period. Since the ownership is not going to be transferred, depreciation period will be a little lower or the earlier of the lease term or the useful life. Lease term is 4 years, useful life is 8 years. So therefore, we choose a period of 4 years to depreciate the asset. In other words, the annual depreciation rate would be 25%. So at the rate of 25%, first year depreciation would be 301,462, which will go as an expense to the income statement. So at the end of first year, or as of 31st of March 20x3, net book value of the asset will be 904,387.5. How we obtain that? From the cost of the asset, which is the present value of the minimum lease payments, we are deducting first year's depreciation. So net book value of asset is shown in the balance sheet on the asset side. Then from the lease schedule, we are calculating the lease liability at the end of year 1, or as at 31st of March 20x3, that is 934,260. How we obtain that? From the opening lease liability, we are deducting the lease payment of 356,000 and adding first year's interest. So the lease liability remaining at the end of the first year, or as at 31st of March 20x3, is 934,260. Then we have seen what will happen to the annual interest. Annual interest are declining. Annual interest is 84,410 in the first year, but by the end of the lease, in the fourth year, it reduces to 23,290, and at the end of the fourth year of the lease, or as at 31st of March 20x6, there is no lease liability, or lease liability is completely or virtually eliminated. But in the first year, interest is 84,410, that goes as an expense to the income statement. So this is the complete working of that question, the answer for that particular question. So today basically we have discussed the accounting treatment for leases by a lessee based on IFRS 16 or SLFRS 16. As I told you, this standard has been revised, or the standard is in effect from 1st January 2019. Before that, before IFRS 16 came into effect, the standard that was applicable for leases was IAS 17, but that standard was replaced by IFRS 16 or SLFRS 16. So as per SLFRS 16, the only change is there for the lessee. In other words, the lessee has to recognize all leases as right of use leases. In other words, if there's an underlying asset, and if the lessee can control the use of the asset in order to get the future economic benefits, he has to recognize the lease as a right of use asset in his balance sheet as an asset, and also a similar value as a lease liability. So this is the only difference. This is the only difference in the new leasing standard, which we frequently, or which we famously call as SLFRS 16. So basically, with this, we can conclude today's session. I hope it was useful. I hope it was understood by all of you who have joined today. And if you have any questions, on this standard particularly, because this standard is a very important standard. So if you have any questions on this standard specifically, if you want to clarify anything, please feel free to question me. If you have any questions, you have my email address, you have my contact numbers, and I am putting these videos in my YouTube channel. Anybody can view these videos. For my previous videos also, there were a lot of views. A lot of people have viewed those videos. really happy about the response I have got for the previous video. So I'm hopeful that this video will also have a quite number of subscribers as well as quite number of views will be there for this video. So if you have friends who are doing the A-level exam this time, please share this video with your friends also. Please ask them to subscribe to my channel. Please ask them to view this video. And if you need to know anything, if you want to clarify anything on the content of this video or even on any other thing related to your A-level exam, so I'll be available. My contact details are there. I hope you will gain from the free video lectures that I am doing every week. So today we have covered SLFRS 16. Previously, we have covered all the relevant standards that are applicable for BC A-level exam. So we'll be continuing like this until your A-level exam. So every week I'm going to share my insights and also I'm going to discuss complete standards and also other topics comprehensively before your exam so that you can get an in-depth knowledge of these subject areas as well as questions before your exam. Right. So my name is Vishnu Bella again. So as I have told previously also, I am a council member of CMA Sri Lanka. I am doing this as a favor for the students because I was a student like you not so long ago. So after completing my exams, I have got my university degree and I'm a member of CMA Sri Lanka. Also, I have other foreign qualifications, but I prefer the CMA qualification because it's a national qualification and it's a national body incorporated by an act of parliament. So my advice for all of you, I know all of you are doing your A-level exam this time. After the A-level exam, you may be thinking of doing various professional accounting programs. So as a professional accountant and as a practitioner, my advice for you is to start with CMA. CMA is a national body. CMA is a national management accounting qualification. So have no doubt, if you can do CMA, of course, you can go for any job locally or internationally. And you will have a recognition locally as well as internationally. You will be recognized for jobs as well as for other foreign qualifications. After the CMB, you can do your degree, you can go for an MBA, or you can get exemptions from many other foreign qualifications. So that is what I did. I first chose CMA. I completed CMA, and based on my CMA achievement, I have got exemption from various other professional accounting bodies, and now I am a member of the accounting bodies, including 2 foreign accounting bodies. So my advice to you is to do the same. CMA is a national program. CMA is a national accounting qualification. So start with CMA, start with the national accounting qualification, complete CMA exams. Thereafter, depending on your choice, if you want to migrate to a foreign country, then of course you can get exemptions from a foreign accounting qualification that is acceptable in that country using your CMA qualification. And also, if you want to do your further studies, say for example, if you want to do MBA or something like that, CMA is an ideal platform because CMA is recognized as a first qualification or as an entry qualification to start your further studies. So thank you very much for joining me today. I wish you all good luck. Thank you very much.